Okay. My name is Nausa Tova. I'm the professor of dermatology. I'm also the dean and head of school of the Nelson Mandela School of Medicine, which is in Durban, South Africa. Colleagues, we are humbly making a plea and a request for you to assist us in ensuring that we harness and get donations from our colleagues, from our the NGOs, the corporate sector, as well as our ex-UKZN alumni, our Alan Taylor residents, previous students who stayed there. Those who are UKZN alumni will remember the vibrant community that we had at Alan Taylor residence. We are making a call to assist our students. As I mentioned, UKZN has the most number of students who are from previously disadvantaged communities. We also have 70% of our first-year medical students are African, a great success in terms of transformation of our medical school. I remember actually when I was doing my first year, I think we were about 100, and there were only, I'd say, 20 to 30% Africans in our class. But things have changed around to actually ensure that we transcribe by the transformation agenda of the medical school. So we have already got assistance from the UKZN Foundation to establish an account where all donors can deposit their donations. We also have medical students who have agreed to donate through their private funds or salaries, an amount of about at least 100 Rand per month to ensure that they assist some of the medical students who are disadvantaged. A small group of privileged medical students who have also agreed to try and donate on a monthly basis, whether it's 50 Rands or 100 Rands, it will really go towards the bigger goal and the dream that we have. And I'm also excited to mention that a couple of months ago, when we were thinking about this initiative, I've spoken to Dr. Imtiaz Solomon, one of our alumni, a really remarkably humanitarian individual. And when I discussed this initiative with him, immediately he donated an amount of about 3 million. I say it again, 3 million towards reduction of the historical debt of the medical students. This was so profound, and I was really humbled by and blown away by this contribution. So we are pleading with you again to say, here we are, let us make a difference. I do know that even the students that are currently doing MPCHB now will plow back when they qualify and assist the other students who find themselves in similar situations. So colleagues, as we say, you are because we are. Umuntu kubuntu, umuntu ngabantu. Let us put our hands on the deck and see how we can assist and support this initiative.
My name is Dr. Fatima Suleiman, newly qualified from Nelson Mandela School of Medicine. I pledge to donate 100 Rand a month towards Prof. Ndlova's Medical Student Fund, and I encourage all alumni of UKZN to do the same. Help make a doctor today.
I'm Dr. Makanya, and I've just completed my final year in medical school, and I'm very happy to be serving my community. Each year, students are faced with the financial struggles, but beating their dreams of completing their studies and giving back to the community as I will. With this initiative, you can relieve that burden and you can help make a doctor's dream come true. I will be taking part in the Professor-level Medical Students Funding Initiative, and I'm urging you to also do the same.
I am Dr. Caitlin Beaumont, a newly qualified medical doctor. UKZN takes up its social responsibility to help academically prosperous students from disadvantaged backgrounds fulfill their dream. So we are asking you, yes you, to do just that. Take up your social responsibility. Help us today. Contribute and help our aspiring doctors.
Okay, right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second platform where we are honoring our legends from UKZN, particularly the School of Clinical Medicine. These are individuals who we look at with pride, colleagues who have inspired us for many years and left a landmark, be it research, teaching, outreach, leadership, etc. You will remember that last year we had Professor Imtiaz Solomon, who all of you know of Gift of the Givers, who was our inaugural guest on this platform. So again, colleagues, the colleagues that you see here, they go through a vigorous process. It's democratic and it's transparent to see what they have done. So if you want to one day sit right here, make sure you work very hard during your junior years. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Professor Samuel Mokhokong and welcome him together with his, I almost said his wife, but his daughter, Basetsane, who accompanied him. Professor Samuel Mokhokong will be 70 years in next month, am I correct? Yes, but look how fresh he's looking. And what are you eating right there in Gauteng? Yeah, so we are so happy to have him here. He's Professor Mochichi Samuel Mokhokong, was the first black South African to qualify as a neurosurgeon in 1987, those days, neurosurgery. Prof. Mokhokong headed the teams for 3 separations of craniopagus Siamese twins. He has trained and produced more than 15 neurosurgeons so far and had produced the youngest neurosurgeon in Africa in 2017. He has obtained a number of awards, including the CEO Award for the Best Employee at Steve Biko Academic Hospital, a Merit Award for Outstanding Contribution in the Medical Field from the Executive Reserve Club in 1999. He's also received the University of the North Onkgopotse Tiro Order of Merit Award. Wow, that's amazing. And in 2000, the Tribute Achievers of the Health Category Award, which was presented by the then President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, the Congress Chairperson for the 27th Congress of Neurosurgeons of South Africa in Sun City. These are all the awards that have been bestowed to this amazing colleague who's sitting right here in front of us, and is a recipient of Certificate of Appreciation for Contribution to Neurosurgery in South Africa in 2018. So as a neurosurgeon, he headed an academic neurosurgical department for more than 20 years. And as an intensivist, he ran the intensive care unit at Medunsa, which is Garankuwa Hospital, for over 5 years. It's a long CV, but I've highlighted some of the accolades and attributes of Professor Samuel Mokhokong. So I am now going to introduce our second guest, who is Professor Lizo Mazwai, who is Emeritus Professor in Surgery. He is 79 years old. Look at him. Looks like a spring chicken. And I'm welcoming him together with his wife, Tuli, who's seated right there in front. And thanks, Tuli, for accompanying Prof. Mazwai to come and be with us this evening. So Professor Mazwai is an Emeritus Professor of Surgery and a former Dean of the Medical School of Walter Sisulu University. He's a past President of Colleges of Medicine of South Africa and Honorary Fellow College of Medicine of South Africa, and he's also been a former Chairman of the South African Medical Research Council, MRC, and past President of the South African Medical Association. He's a former member of Health Professors Council of South Africa and National Health Ethics Research Committee since 2004 and 10. Prof. Mazwai has achieved a lot during his career and is a founding chairperson board of Office of Health Standards Compliance of the National Department of Health, and he has received 7 honorary academic fellowship, done over 30 conference presentations, and produced 16 journal articles and a chapter in tropical surgery textbook. So colleagues and guests, you'll agree with me, we've got amazing colleagues here. And I look forward to be like you one day when I'm 80 years old. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand over now to our lovely DVC, Professor Ncama, Busi Ncama, who is going to take the stage, and then hand over to our MC, Ms. Nongcebo Mackenzie, who's been amazing in addressing this platform. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Dlova. Good evening, colleagues, esteemed colleagues, deans of schools and other portfolios, heads of disciplines, members of our UKZN community, UKZN alumni, students, media houses. I greet you all. And thank you. It really is a lovely day today. We are so happy to be honoring the legends. And I must thank Professor Dlova first before I go on, because this was her brainchild. I mean, she really felt that it's important for us to recognize all the people that have done great things while they are alive. I think during COVID, we learned when we suddenly heard of people that had passed away, and we thought, wow, we never got a chance to honor them while they were still alive, and they could hear how we appreciate the work that they had done. As a professor already said, my name is Busincama. I'm the DVC of the College of Health Sciences here at UKZN. So today I'm here also representing my boss, Professor Nanapogu, who is on leave. And he really sends greetings to all of you. And he says he's sorry he can't be here. Today, it's not just an ordinary day, but a very special day where we are honoring and appreciating legends in the medical space. We are celebrating giants in medicine and devoted alumni who've dedicated their whole lives to change people's lives for the better. Our alumni guests, as you've heard, it's Professors Mochichi Samuel Mkhokong, who is the Professor Emeritus of University of Pretoria. In fact, he should be Professor Emeritus of UKZN. We should look at that, maybe an honorary at least. And Professor Lizo Mazwai, also Emeritus Professor of Surgery. So good evening, professors, and really thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us this evening to share your experiences and your life journey with us. The School of Clinical Medicine, under the leadership of Professor Dlova, who is the dean there, initiated and has been running a series of alumni awards where we are honoring medical alumni legends in the UKZN Medical School. The idea is to celebrate these esteemed legends while they are still alive. This series of honor will grant legend alumni an opportunity to impart knowledge by sharing their life experiences and life stories with the wider community of UKZN and the public through a casual conversation. So there's nothing formal. We just want to hear your story, and Ms. Nongcebo Mackenzie will facilitate the conversation. This is the second one. We've done the first inaugural launch of this program last year in September, where we had Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, who is our very notable UKZN alumni legend and an internationally recognized humanitarian. This year, it's an honor to host Professors Mochichi Samuel Mkhokong, the first Black South African to qualify as a neurosurgeon in 1987, and headed 3 teams who conducted surgery separations of craniophagus Siamese twins. And who can forget Mpo and Mponyana? I still remember them, even up to today. And there was even a song, I think it was by Soul Brothers or someone, about Mpo and Mponyana. So I've never forgotten that, and it's really a pleasure to finally have you here, Prof. And we cannot wait to tap into your experience. During those times, making it into academia was not easy at all, especially if you were a Black descendant. We are also graced by the presence of Professor Lizo Mazwai, renowned emeritus professor in surgery. Professor Lizo Mazwai is a former dean of the medical school at Walter Sisulu University, just to mention a few of his accolades. We are also very honored to host you, Prof, today. Your work speaks volumes of your determination to change the sphere of medicine for the better. We would like to wish both of, we also want to wish Prof Mazwai a happy birthday in advance. We understand it's your birthday tomorrow, and happy birthday in advance. Can we all stand and join in the singing? We'll sing for him today. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Prof. Happy birthday to you. Yep. Hooray. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I strongly believe that we can learn a lot from both Professors Mkhokong and Prof Mazwai this afternoon. As the Zulu saying goes, indlela ibuzwa kwabaphambili. With these words, I welcome you all. Thank you, and I'm now handing over to you, Nongcebo.
Thank you very much, Professor Ngama. Thank you very much, Professor Dlova. It's always such an honor to be part of this platform where we are really showcasing Black academic excellence at its best. And as Professor Ngama just said, Indlela ibuzwa ngabaphambili, and I ask myself, class of 1968, class of 1980, where such things were merely dreams, if you consider the regime of that time. What sowed the seed in you, Professor Mazwai, to become a medical doctor?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I thought it might come up, and I don't want to make a long story.
We're here for the story.
First of all, I grew up in a very, very rural area. But my parents were, you know, an educated family, and they insisted that school was the thing. So there was no kind of choice. I had to go to school and work hard. So I think my parents influenced me a lot in sort of getting education for whatever form. But then the area where I lived, we lived where there were no doctors. There was a doctor and 2 doctors in town, and they used to come around on itinerary clinics and stop next to my home every Wednesday. So that's thing sort of said, there's a doctor, he's helping people, irrespective of the circumstances, but there was somebody there. And then my father also had a friend who was a doctor, Dr. Hermanus. And it was that closeness which made me feel that an ordinary person can become a doctor, because the idea of a doctor was somebody who was high up there. So when I saw my father being friends with a doctor, I thought, well, I could do it. To cut a long story short, by the age of 12, when I finished standard 6, I'd made up my mind I wanted to become a doctor. So I went to a high school. It was called Hilltown Institution, a Methodist mission in the Fort Beaufort area. 300 miles away from home, we used to go and stay in a boarding school 6 months and come back for 1 month, 6 months and back again until I finished my matric. By the time I finished matric, I had to take choices. Either go to Fort Hare to do a BSc and then go to medicine. But then there was this introduction of Bantu education at that time, and I wasn't so sure if I was going to go to Fort Hare and make it to University of Natal. So I took what was then the shortcut. Instead of BSc, MPCHB, I went straight for MPCHB. And also an interesting thing at that time, the government of the day was actually offering scholarships, bursary loans for a certain grade of students. Well, with a first class pass in matric, I was one of the recipients of that government scholarship to study medicine here at the University of Natal. We called it Wentworth then. And when you left home in the Transkei and they said you were going to Wentworth, they thought it was some big town in England. And well, Wentworth, I think those who live here know what it's like. But I think also that was an inspiring environment, because as students, we actually started what is called the Happy Valley Clinic. And we volunteered every week. There was a duty roster once we became clinical to go and work at that clinic. It was a sort of a welfare or NGO thing. So having gone to medical school, I was sort of kept revived about the needs. So to sum up that question is, it was the need that I saw. And also believe that one man, maybe woman now, one man can make a difference to people's lives. So that's what spurred me on. I think I'll stop for a while.
The audience will also have an opportunity to ask questions. So as we are in conversation and something sort of like piques your interest, there will be an opportunity to ask questions during the conversation. And please, on your social media, please share that we are live streaming on the University of KwaZulu-Natal South Africa page. So we are live streaming. Please, those who weren't able to make it here today, that you know would be interested in this conversation, just drop them a quick WhatsApp and just drop them a quick message, share on your pages, just to catch the conversation. Professor Mokokong, I cannot imagine the weight of being the first black neurosurgeon. I cannot imagine the weight of having to jump through the hoops, because there's a lot of jumping through the hoops that's got to be done now. I can only imagine in those times. And when you've been put in a position where you are the recipient of this first through your hard work, of course, and there are others looking up to you, and you are the only person in that category that they can look up to. The weight of that?
Yes, it is immense, and in fact it directs how you should go on from that point onwards.
Yeah.
Because if you are in that position, then it means, you know, when you qualify as a specialist, you can either stay in academics or go into private practice to make money. I had no choice of private practice, because as the first, you are expected to open the way for the others. And I'm happy I did that, and I've actually trained now more than 20 neurosurgeons. 80% of them are local Africans. So I had no choice but to follow that route and open the way for them.
If you are in that position and you're opening the way for other people, who's opening the way for you, though?
Who you mean? Yeah, it's as a Christian, I believe God Almighty He knew that somebody must open the way here, and I probably was in the right place at the right time. Well, I say as a Christian because my grandfather was actually a reverend, and I grew under him. And he's one of those people who worked hard and was a commercial farmer. And through farming, he took his children to school. And so his last son, Professor E.T. Mohokong, also an alumni of here, who's now 88 years, was also the first gynecologist. And so I was under his shadow all along, so that when I finished, and he asked me, what do you want to specialize in? It just happened that gynecology, I passed very well in one of my subjects. And I said, gynecology? He said to me, but there can only be one bull in the crawl. I thought he would be excited, but he said to me, there can only be one bull in the crawl. So, not that he was stopping me, but then I reconsidered and said, let me take neurosurgery. And when I told him that, he's the one who said, that's it, now you're talking. Because there's nobody there. We've got to open the ways. So he's been a great influence in my life, directing me where to turn left, right, and center.
We've heard how Professor Mazwai found his way to the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I always ask myself, because, you know, if somebody goes to Joburg, we automatically think Johannesburg, you know, better prospects just from an economic perspective. So we never question how people end up in Joburg. It's almost an automatic answer. How did you find yourself at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, in KZN?
Well, I must say, I'm from the villages of Polokwane in Petersburg. You know, I grew, my grandfather was a priest in that village. So when I passed there, one of his sons was a teacher in Soweto. He's the late former rector of the University of Natal, Professor P.C. Mohokong. So I grew up with him. He was in Soweto. So I was actually a farm boy who went to do high school in Soweto. So I wasn't originally from Soweto, but nonetheless, I was at Orlando West High School, and my friend, compatriot, Dr. Frank Chikane was at Orlando High. So we were actually contemporaries. We passed together and then went to the University of the North. Yes.
So I've been looking, as we're talking, I've been looking at your hands, because those are the tools of your trade. And I wonder, when somebody places that much faith in your hands, literally in your physical hands, in your being able to stitch by stitch, cut by cut, make a difference to them. I mean, Mpho and Mponyane, it was in the news when the living twin passed on, and it revived that whole story. And those were stories that captured all of us. I was a child when that happened. Those are the stories. And so you can imagine what an honor it is for me to be sitting with you gentlemen, because these are things that we read about and heard about, but the faces behind them were usually the cases and not so much, or rather the faces that were in front of us were more the cases and not so much the academics and the hands behind that. To have somebody place that much faith physically in your hands, how does that feel when you're walking into theatre, when you're walking into a consultation and somebody says, I trust you?
Well, from my perspective, I would say I've had people say, you saved my life. And yet while you do it, it is really a sense of duty to do that. I get told stories now about some of the heroic things that I have done. In an area that is Lusikisiki, for example, is rural, there are no other specialists. Somebody comes in with a ruptured liver from an accident, and you just have, I don't know who gives you the courage, it might be God-given, some power like gets hold of you to say, I am going to this person, because I've been dealing with trauma a lot. So the emergence is, you're not going to die. I'm going to fix you. And you just get that drive to do the things. And as I say, it's an inspirational kind of thing, because you get taught things. You do them slowly while you're being taught. But under pressure, especially, as I said, with accidents, there's something that possesses you. This is my case, possesses you to do the right thing at the right time, quickly enough to save somebody's life. And I think that thing about saving a life is extremely strong and powerful. And I know it from the experience now of people who've come back to me. I don't even remember some of them. They said, you saved my life, or my child's life was saved because of this and this and that. Beyond that, the feeling is great and feels good, but then you know that it's also got a further burden of expectation, because people look up to you all the time, and you have to do the right thing all the time, more or less. And we are doctors. We do lose people, patients on the table. And it also needs that kind of understanding inside of you, how they feel. You go to theatre, people are sitting, they're hoping you're going to come out, and you come with the bad news. And they're sitting there, and you've got to talk to them and and explain. There are some jokes we make sometimes about things that are not funny. For example, it's when you take the relatives away to put them away, because they want to come in sometimes very close to the action. They see what you're doing, and they may have certain, unpleasant feelings about it. And the story I remember was one, we were in King Edward, a patient had obstruction and did a tracheostomy. So apparently the relatives were around, and when he cut the throat and put the tube in, unfortunately the patient did not survive. So when they went to talk to them, the relatives were not happy. They said, but will you cut his throat, doctor? So this is the lighter side of things, but it's just a very serious burden on what you can do with your hands. But they're guided. In my case, I think there's some guidance beyond my just learning.
There was a doctor who posted on Twitter 2 or 3 years ago, and he said, I've just done an 8-hour operation, and when the person came to, the first person they thanked is God. And I looked at them and I said, I was standing there for 8 hours. Yes. And I think the way you're putting it is such a beautiful testimony that in as much as there's the human being is doing the work,
Yes.
the act of it's not just a physical act.
Yeah.
There's a lot. You've got to be physically present. You've got to be mentally present. You've got to be emotionally present
Yes.
to give feedback to the family, whether it's positive or negative. They've got
Yes.
all these questions, and you understand them in a medical term, in medical terms, and to break that down to basic layman's terms, but also to break it down emotionally to a
Yes.
person. I think that's quite difficult. Professor Mokokong, can you remember your first surgery? Your very first one? Out of all the ones you've done, I'm asking you to think very
Yes, no, that's of course when we were still training
Mhm.
as registrars.
Mhm.
And of course that's the emergency, as my colleague alludes to, because, you know, that's where you are there 24 hours, every 24 hours, if you are on call. And that's the time when your senior is asleep. Of course, there's always somebody senior to call if you have problems. But that's the time we start doing these operations. And you must be sure you can do it. And you look forward to surprising your senior the following day to report that this man was dying, he had bleeding, I had to open the head because he trained you to. And he sees the patient survive. So he gets pleased that he wasn't woken up. But usually our first times are under those circumstances where you are right there, it's an emergency, and you've been trained to deal with it. And we say, today I'm not calling him because he's trained me enough, so I do it. It's difficult to, it must have been one of, you know, the one that kills quickly in neurosurgery is what we call an extradural hematoma, where there's progressive bleeding in the head and it presses the brain. If you quickly open and decompress, then you save a life. Yes, it must have been an extradural hematoma. Yes.
Your most memorable surgery, the one that you will never forget, for whatever reason. Maybe it was the most difficult, maybe it was the one where you really, really were not sure if the person was going to pull through. Your most memorable one.
Yeah, I think I alluded to it when I talked about the ruptured liver.
Yes.
First of all, this was in the town of Lusikisiki, then maybe under 500 people. There was a small St. Elizabeth mission hospital with 70 beds. I was the only surgeon. I was the only surgeon at the time. And this young man belongs to the community. He turned a car in the main street in town. Collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital. I was called. And you come up first thing, you don't know, say, oh, is this you? Like, you know, your friend's son. And then you say, he's bleeding, let's open up quickly. So that ruptured liver was something, was the first, because what I did, I only learned afterwards, it was the right thing. I took some omentum, which is, you know, thing, and stuffed it into the liver, which was ruptured. And there are special needles for liver rupture, and there were none of those. So I just took the extra care to patch it, so to speak. That's the word I would use, to patch that liver. He survived, he lived, and the family was ever so grateful. Sadly, he passed away. Well, I have my wife here now. Passed away from COVID. I'm so used to referring to her. He passed away from COVID, sadly, in Pretoria, and there was, he couldn't be helped. But I thought to myself, here's a man, I saved his life, and I'm not being immodest when I said that. He lived and everybody was happy, and I cursed COVID when I heard that it passed away from COVID, because he was my first, he lived with me in the family, in the community.
You mentioned, obviously this would have been under different circumstances, that you did the operation and the needles that you needed were not available. This is just under completely different circumstances. But I'm asking this in the context of your research, 20 years of medical education in South Africa, in rural South Africa, lessons for the future.
Yes.
What came out of that? Because all we ever hear, we didn't have this, we don't have this, we've got to be creative, these are the reports that we see. And obviously as outsiders we gasp and say, how do they do it?
Well, things have improved a lot since 1970 when I was confronted with those problems. In the present day, because hospitals have been regraded, upgraded, and I think most of them are working at the capacity at which they should be working, from a district to a regional and also a provincial hospital. So there's a sort of a referral system, and everybody is trained to resuscitate patients, keep them alive, and send them either by air ambulance. But there are things that just need to be done, and you just don't have. And the word that's brought one is sort of be innovative and think of an idea that could save the day for that moment. In terms of availability of equipment and other things to work, yes, I think it's right through. It's not necessarily the rural hospitals or district. I think sometimes even Sam might have had an occasion where he wanted a particular stitch to do a certain thing, and it wasn't there, because some of these things you can't anticipate. But then you make do with what you have, and if it's an emergency. If it's not, then you take your time, collect all the things before you start operating or doing things beyond. Because there's also the medical ethics thing that you're saving a life, yes, but at the same time, you must not undertake things that are beyond your training and capacity. Mm-hmm. And then when you run into problems, there might be criticism about, you shouldn't have done this, you should have done this. So it's a very complex, most of the time, split decisions about whether you do this or you do that. Can you use that or can you use this? And it's something, I think, it's not in the books. Some of it is a gift, and you learn, and I do believe in being gifted by God with certain things, even the hands. Mm-hmm. There are people who like to be surgeons, very much, but their hands just won't let them, because they don't have the nimbleness. When you're doing sutures and you're tying deep down, sometimes, a couple of inches into the abdomen, and feel the knot there without seeing it, that it's secure, and you put it. Those kind of things, the technique, is extremely important as gift, and you learn it.
Professor Ngama and Professor Dlova, I'm relying on you for time because I don't have a watch, and I'm caught up in, I'm enthralled by what I'm hearing. So I'm really relying on you for time.
We have 20 minutes.
We have 20. Okay, thank you. Professor Mohokong, have you ever been in a position where when you look at all the brains and the minds and the hands and the acumen that's passed through your hands, and have you ever been in those sessions, ever looked at someone and said, listen, you've got the acumen, you've got it up here, you understand, but you don't have it in here. You don't have what it takes in here to be a doctor. You don't have, as Professor Mazwai was saying now, that you might want to be a surgeon, but you just don't have it. Have you ever been confronted with that situation?
As a training person, it does happen, but particularly with our line of work, I must say, I'm proud to say, the people who have come to me to be trained, they all made it. Yes, of course, some hands are better than others, but that's another thing. You want to give them the basics and the confidence, and from there, their gift will run with them. So as you train, no, I haven't stopped anybody at any stage of their training to say, look, you don't have it. I think the big reason is it's all in the mind, in the brains. I mean, quite honestly speaking, the type of students who come to do medicine, as you know, especially during the time of apartheid about the best from their students, because we didn't have engineering, science, and everybody in that category just wanted to be a doctor, because historically, because of apartheid, it is the only profession where you would be independent and you wouldn't look for a job or beg anybody for a job. So because of that, I think that's why many of us are lucky to get people actually who can go all the way. If they stop, it's because they're broken down, but not because you stopped them. But the idea is to give them the confidence and the proper training of the basics, and the rest is their own. Out there, of course, still there are those whose hands are better than others. So yes, it's an issue, but it's not. It hasn't been an absolutely limiting factor in my experience. Yes, because even hands can be trained. Yes, but of course there are others that you can't train. I'm not saying there aren't. But no, the answer is most of the people I've had started and finished.
We're going to start taking questions. I'm just going to ask that if you've got a question, if you can just raise your hand. I think somebody will be able to come around with a roving mic. Someone, either Zintle, will be able to.
Good for time.
We're still good for time. Okay, all right.
And I cough, you must know.
Okay. When the doctor coughs, you must know. Professor Mkhokong, how do you, if I have a bad day at work, it's because something went wrong with the equipment and, something happened with Centec and we couldn't broadcast. It's something that is a machine that somebody needed to either pull a lever, flip on a switch, can switch it on, restart it, reboot it, troubleshoot it, and then we can go back on air. If the phone doesn't work and we can't reach a guest, the guest wasn't reachable. That's a completely different bad day at work, or things didn't go as planned at work, compared to when you are faced with many, many life and death situations. And I would think that there would have been days where the person has had the surgery and it will restore some level of function, or it will save their life. And progress seems good and they're all on track. All the signs are positive. And then somehow things just take, somebody called it a sharp curve. And all of a sudden they just take, a downward turn. And you look at, I suppose similar to the COVID example that you were making, you look at this person and you said, I did all that I could do. Scientifically and medically, I did all that I could do. And somehow, how does that feel?
Well, it's very crushing, because in our profession, we're dealing with people. Somebody comes to you, wants help. So the most important first step is to build rapport between yourself and your patient. The way you ask, the way you take history, the way you examine. It's amazing how patients can be impressed, and with your personal touch as you do that to them. And then, of course, once you have that rapport, the support, and you say, look, unfortunately, this thing needs to be done, and it's a big operation, and mistakes can happen, but we try best not to, to be careful. What my personal experience is, once you've won the patient on your side, they will allow you to do anything. Where you find them stopping it, there's something that they doubt about you. So it does happen, and things do turn bad, especially in our field, neurosurgery, because that's the brain that's controlling life. The most difficult operations in there is what we call an aneurysm, which means blood goes in the vessels, there's an area that's weak, and it can burst and compress the brain and kill the patient. Things can go wrong whilst you go and try and fix that area. The thing can burst even before you reach it. And the bleeding can be so profuse that you may not find your way. Yes, we've been through those situations. This is where some of us as Christians, that's where you subconsciously call the maker. And once or twice, I was in a situation when I did that, and suddenly I found I had things under control. And I look back and I say, but what did I do except call the maker? So I don't know what you make out of that. But I always tell people, neurosurgery, because we are on the brink between life and death. We're close to the domain of God, you know. There are those you say, no, these are mine. Those, he says, well, that you can still save. Yes.
I think it echoes what you were saying, Professor Mazwai.
It definitely, in fact, I was just thinking, we didn't rehearse some of these things, but I listened to him, and I sort of tried to plug in between when we're talking about trust. You say, well, if people are going to come to you, they're going to have an operation, they trust. But what is it that makes them trust you? Do you build that trust? Well, some people, you first come to them with, they've got a reputation of being good at such and such a thing. So, and they've been recommended that of all the gynecologists or the surgeons, he's the best. But you've got to live up to that reputation. And that's a challenge all the time. And from my experience, if people need an operation and they are reluctant, I agree with you, there's something they don't understand. You just have to sit and talk through. It's not something you can do it in 1 hour. Sometimes they go to the family. They say, no, I have to go and talk to my father. And being African, some of them go and sacrifice a goat or do something before they can undergo this operation because they might die. So people almost universal are afraid of death. I know them, some may not. But the reason I say it, but doctor, you're not going to cut me alive. So no, we'll put you to sleep. And then they say, suppose I don't wake up. That's the question. Now, you haven't got the anesthetist. And I often, resort to very simple things. I said, every day you go to bed, you look forward, you sleep. If you go to sleep, you always wake up. You believe that. And that's exactly the same kind of thing. If you did not believe that you're going to wake up, maybe you wouldn't want to go to sleep. But every day you do sleep because you know the sun will come up again. And that is, we work with that kind of rhythm. It may not be scientific, but sometimes you have to talk people into your thinking and understanding, and that you're going to do the best to avoid any problems. These days, informed consent is a serious legal, it used to be ethical, serious legal matter. You must explain the nature of the operation, why it's necessary, what are the complications, and right up, and you can go right down to say, well, you might not make it. It's very difficult. So that kind of inspiration or presence of some, I don't know, supernatural in my life has been very important. I believe that, as you mentioned, the Almighty is there to help you. I went to study in England. I was offered job. This is end of 1970, because I finished medical school. I went to work in a mission hospital for 3 years because I thought being a medical superintendent in a mission hospital was a great thing. But then the government took over the hospital, so there were no missions to do by the time I was ready to do that. But then having difficulty in getting into a program in South Africa then in 1960-70, I studied in England. Through, again, missionaries who helped me to organize the schools. While I was there, when I said England, it's actually UK, England and Scotland, because I worked in Glasgow and wrote my exams in Edinburgh. I was offered posts 2 or 3 times to stay And then I said to myself, but why did I come here? I came here to study because I wanted to go and help those people who have no one. If I had stayed in Glasgow, I would, in one department, I would have been one of 6 surgeons fighting to get some work to do. When I came back to Lusikisiki as one surgeon for a population of 300,000 people. I used to work in the morning in the surgery, drive 40 kilometers on all the worst roads to do a clinic and then admit patients. In the morning, I would go to theater, operate on those people, and then leave. There would be another doctor, and then leave and come to Lusikisiki in town, 40 kilometers. And I did that for 5 years before I went to the medical school in Mthatha. And my driving thing was, one man can make a difference. And I feel this is a calling, like the old thing. And I did that kind of thing with great joy, and I enjoyed it. Sometimes I can't believe I did all the things that I did or I'm said to have done. Even the idea of coming to do medicine from pre-GP, because 3 years 2 years in McCord's, 1 in the Ridley Hospital, which is Dutch Reformed Mission, and then 5 years in private practice to pay the bursary loan for the government. And when that was finished, I came back. It was 8 years after I left medical school. By then, I had bought all the 3 books in anatomy, physiology, and pathology. Arrived in January. I felt I was ready to write in September. No, I was told, boy, there's a queue here. The people who are senior to you, they must be given a chance first. You can't come in January and write in October. No way. But I talked to my missionary friends. They organized a course for me. So I went to a course in London. I got there in September, and we wrote the exams in September, October, not December. And believe what? I got through my primary. First shot in England after I was told here, you can't make it. When I came back, there were a lot of discussions like, oh, you're lucky to get the exams. Well, I said, well, I'm glad I was lucky. And then the head of department was not, happy about what had happened. In terms of the fact that they'd refused me. So he wanted to make up. He organized a job for me in Glasgow. I went to Glasgow and worked for another 18 months. All in all, I finished my fellowship examinations 3 years, after 3 years instead of 4 years, and I came back. And when I came back, I didn't have a post because I came back too soon. And then I went back to Lusikisiki to work for a while, and then came back to finish the term and registered. So it's been a journey that goes up and down. The reason I tell that story is so I can tell you that lessons, perseverance, and purpose, and you just stick to it. Just stick to it. If you want something, stick to it. Purpose and perseverance. And then there's another saying that I picked up, I hang it. It says, I shall pass through this world but once. Any good that I can do to any fellow human being, let me do it now, for I shall not pass this way again. And then lastly, your father, there was those 2 hands. I say, God give me the courage to change the things I can change. I've forgotten the other one now. Grant us serenity to accept the things we cannot change.
The wisdom to know the difference.
And the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes.
I live it, but I must keep reading it now. Like I said, we didn't rehearse. So those are I believe that I got to this position like, why are they picking on me? There's something that people see in you that maybe you're not even aware of. The first time I was nominated. I went to the University of Transkei then in 1990 as head of surgery. Within 2 years, I was nominated to become dean. I actually turned it down. And because I said, I've 2 years, I'm still building up a department. I can't take the deanship at that time. When we came out of the meeting, one of the professors in pathology said to me, don't you ever do that again. He talked to me like a schoolmaster. He says, people want you to do this thing and you turn it down. Don't you ever do that again. It like shocked me. And I thought again, well, I did get nominated again and I became dean for 14 years. That's the outcome of a thing. So there are things that happen now, but you don't know and you don't see where it's going. But faith also takes you through. Thank you.
Sure. Those are some very powerful words. There's some very, very powerful words. You said something, Professor Mazwai, and I'm coming to Professor Mkhokong with this. When you said you could have stayed in Glasgow and you could have stayed in Edinburgh and you would have been literally scrambling for work to do, but you came home because you were 1 to 300,000. There's, just to explain where I'm going with the question, there's a gentleman, his name is Brent Meersman, and his mother was schizophrenic, and she was schizophrenic in the 50s, 60s and 70s, where there wasn't enough research, and lobotomy was the supposed treatment, but obviously it's now determined to not be, and all of that. And so we got to a point where we were talking about, because his book is written in English, and I said to him, well, would you ever translate your book? And he said, I don't think it would be relevant to somebody who's not the same race as me and speaks English. And I said, why? I said, but they wouldn't relate. Just as somebody back then would have difficulty explaining themselves to a doctor because of the language barrier, because of all the barriers that existed. And I cannot fathom how they would have been treated in those circumstances. Now, I come back to you with this because what you've just said now, coming home to be the ratio 1 is to 300,000.
Yeah,
but
just for correction, make sure it's the thing, it's 300,000 people population that I was serving.
Yes.
Okay. Otherwise, as far as surgeons were concerned, I was 1 in 6 of the whole South Africa black surgeons in 1980 when I qualified.
And now when you look at that in the context of what you said earlier, that people will come, they will pray, some will sacrifice before coming to surgery. The ability to sit there and have somebody say, I'm going to say it in isiZulu because I can't speak. Ngiphethwe yini? Sengehle ngenyuka. And you are able to say to them and articulate it to them. The mannerisms matter. The choice of words matter. What you captured as, just bedside manner. There's so many nuances that a person, again, it goes back to that trust. When a person can say, that the impact of that.
Yeah, it's very important. In fact, if I were to stand in front of medical students, the one thing I would tell them that your success is at that moment of the interface between you and the patient, because once once they are convinced you are the right person, once you have won their trust, we have experienced that even when things go bad and you are shattered and you go back to them to say things went bad, amazingly they will say, you've tried your best. You can't win them all. Now there's nothing more comforting than just that. Because once you have won your patient and their relatives trust, they accept anything that comes out. In fact, I would say there would be much fewer litigations if people took that first step properly. Yeah.
I'm going to open the questions up to the floor. Is there a roving microphone at the back, or would you need to use this one? This one. Okay, all right. Somebody's going to walk around with the microphone. Actually, let me walk around with the microphone. Why not? Okay, any questions? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Nomakwezi Kanyile, School of Clinical Medicine. I think it's just an honor and privilege to have you both here. Perhaps you can give me some insight, because I think we, as a college or a school, especially when we're training medical students, there's awareness made about mental well-being. So if we are sitting with such great leaders, and during the apartheid period, I mean, what sustained your mental well-being and state? And perhaps your insight can then give, our students, the current students that have attended, and those that are viewing this, what is the sustainability around mental well-being and awareness? Maybe share your experience during the apartheid period, because I think that is what is affecting our colleges. There's a lot of policies that have been made around to address that, and it stems from the moment students enter the clinical rotations and years, you find that they do not cope, and they don't make it because of the mental well-being, and that is just amazing that we have you guys to share some knowledge during that apartheid period. Thank you.
Yes.
You've always been first.
No, I thought it was more a comment.
Oh.
I think some insights would be great, though, Professor Mkhong, because how do you keep your head and your wits about you?
Well, I mean, you mean in what, when you are still training, or when you have...
Through it all, because it's, it's wonderful being lauded for what you have done and what you have achieved.
Yes.
But it was not luck.
It was hard work.
It was hard work, and hard work
Yes.
inadvertently comes with a lot of pressure.
Yes.
Being the first anything comes with a lot of pressure. Being the
Yes.
first black anything comes with a lot of pressure.
Yes.
A lot of pressure you are now representing. You cannot fail. You've got to set the standard, because if you're the first black person who did it and you didn't do it properly, well, what's coming?
Yes.
The disappointment that you would have passed on inadvertently to people without even knowing, had you not been such a standard of black excellence, both of you gentlemen, that comes with a lot of pressure. And it was a pressure of a different kind. You were in high school in the 1970s. The context of that, we've just come out of June month. The context of that, where we look at that and we like, oh, history. You lived in those times.
Yeah.
Those transitions to Bantu education that you were referring to, Professor Mazwai, to us it's history. We talk of different things now that we are facing, but those were things that literally changed your lives in terms of how far you could progress, how you could progress, what you could progress in becoming medical doctors, because there was no engineering, there was no this, there was no that. That comes with its own pressures.
Yes. No, that's true. In my career, the biggest pressure really was this that you said a few times about the issue of the separation of the Siamese twins. But let me correct something here. Mpho and Mponyana were the first ones in 1988, and I think credit goes to the head of neurosurgery at VETS, because that was at the Baragwanath Hospital, Professor Lipschitz. I was in the team because I was a junior consultant. Again, it's issues of fate. I was based at Medunsa, at the Harankua Hospital, and to get more exposure so that we can come and lift the name of Medunsa. Medunsa is one of was for a long time the youngest medical institution in our country. And a lot of people, we had to work hard to make people trust us. So I had gone to vets to work with the fellows at vets for 2 years, so that when I go back there, they must know there's somebody there whom we have worked with. So it is that time that the first operation occurred. But it was a work of fate, because when I went back to Harankua Hospital, 3 sets came straight to Harankua because of this referral pattern. You know, they were from Limpopo. So the first one came, then came the other one from Zimbabwe, because we did the first one. The most successful of the one was the Banda twins. I just wanted to, because I'm sure my colleagues will be listening, if I don't correct this error, that Mponyana was my doing. No, it wasn't. I was junior, but fate put me there so that when I go back, I can deal with 3 other sets. But of course, we called, in our profession, you try to do the best. But this was a situation where nobody did it first. So that's why you look at the whole world, and we saw Ben Carson, Professor Ben Carson, separated the Binde twins at Johns Hopkins Hospital. And it so happened that the time he separated them was the time we were doing it with Mponyana. So when the others came, I simply communicated with my fellow African-American colleague, and we did them together.
Fate didn't have you there.
Yes.
It was not fate.
Well,
it was not fate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Prof.
Evening, everyone. I'm Sandile Kupega, one of the registrars in internal medicine. I'm truly inspired by the things that you professors have done, and I'm really grateful that I'm part of this session today. I have a couple of questions. A few were asked by some of the registrars that were not able to attend. First goes to the neurosurgeon. They wanted to know, being a neurosurgeon is such a busy life. How do you balance your personal life and being a neurosurgeon? Oftentimes as a registrar, post-call is a luxury. Sometimes you leave late. How do you balance it all? And for you, Professor Mazwai, I was fortunate that I was part of Happy Valley Clinic during my training in medical school.
Okay.
And I really had an awesome time there, but we often were faced with some difficulties with the lack of support from the management. And what keeps you going? What are the strategies that you had in trying to rope the management team in trying to, the modern day student, how can they start these initiatives in trying to, to impact on the communities? And to both of you, the last question that I want to know is that to anyone who wants to follow in your footstep, what kind of advice do you have for them at this stage? Thanks.
Yes, they said, how do you balance your life? The answer is, I don't think we can say we have succeeded to balance our lives. The way I look at it is, are you there? To me, the most critical thing, that with your work being so demanding, are you there for the needs of your family and your growing children? And I would be lying if I say I was there all the time, but you need a life partner who is very understanding, who's ready to step in. We have raised wonderful girls. We got 3 girls. They are successful, but I'll openly say their mother was mostly with them because of the pressure of the work. In fact, in neurosurgery, the fellow I respected, Professor van Rensbeck at the University of Pretoria, who was my predecessor, I took after him. When a registrar came to look for a job, he would sit with him in the office and say to him, are you married? If the fellow is not married, he would say, I would advise you to finish training before you get married. If you are married, he would say to you, I better warn you, you may get divorced in the process. So you better work on the support at home. It's difficult. It's demanding. So I don't think we balanced it well, but fortunately, our life partners step in, and of course the children realize the situation on the ground. I wish I was there for them, you know, more than I was. I wish I was there. My daughter is there, you can ask, you know. But no, it's difficult to balance that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed, it is difficult, but if you're starting at the sort of personal level, the word I would say is discipline. I think that I went to boarding school at the age of 12, and until I finished matric, and as I said, we spent of the 12 months, probably only 3 months, you know, with parents. I was raised mainly by my grandfather. My parents also were in business and not there all the time. But the discipline I refer to is that if you keep on training yourself, it becomes second nature. That is in terms of working hard. In fact, we get a word now called workaholic. If you don't do anything, you just get restless. You know, I wonder how the patient is doing. So I operated on so-and-so. You take up the call, say, how is Mr. So-and-so? You know, we haven't been called. It becomes second nature if you can discipline yourself or learn to discipline. That's the personal level. But as far as family is concerned, it's very difficult to balance. I'm certain that the children went to boarding school. And I'm grateful they're boarding schools because I couldn't get up in the morning, drive them to school, or my wife, and then go to work and come back. And the worst one was coming back late, and they're sitting, waiting for have supper, and their dad is not there, and they sometimes have to eat alone. But you must maximize time that you have with them and make time. For example, taking time out. I've mentioned that it's my birthday on Saturday, actually. And I decided that I'm going to go up there. Most of the children are in Johannesburg. Some are here in Durban. Just to have time with them. And I chose that day. I've closed my surgery. I'm still practicing. I didn't close my surgery today and tomorrow. And Friday, I'll go back to work on myself like I'm taking a holiday. And there's a conscious, deliberate thing. So that's the driving force about discipline. You will never be 100% balanced, but they must understand that it is the nature of your work, or that they will miss you at times. So the boarding schools were a great help. To refer to some of the other points about Happy Valley Clinic. Yeah, it was a student initiative. I'm not quite sure who started, but it was because I went to Natal University. It was 1962 when we started there.
The fourth years when they went into the clinical years.
To the clinical
and
years.
then you would find those are the students who would practice there from their seniors.
The seniors.
Yes.
It was good for us. We learned. But as far as support and money, thanks to something called RAG in those days. And we used to collect a lot of money from RAG and put it into the coffer. So we're literally going around the streets collecting money and then put it into a kitty and with a committee, and we looked after that. So in fact, even that was a great team building, strong community involvement. When I went to University of Transkei, WSU now, I keep using the old word, WSU. Our program is a community-based program. Even as I speak here, at the same hospital I started in 1972, it was 70 beds, it's now 400 beds, It's a regional hospital. Students come there, and I still teach fifth-year students. And at the medical school, Monday and Friday, I still go and teach medical students in fourth year and in sixth year. And if I don't teach them, I miss them. There's one who's the son of grandson to Professor Simji, Ahmed Simji.
Yes.
He's in the final year.
Yeah.
He's the class monitor. And they phone, I give them my numbers, they phone me anytime. Prof, are you coming today? What are we talking about? So you keep that community, maybe keeps you young as well, interacting with the students. So don't stop teaching until it's gone. Excuse me. Lean on community to support whatever it is if you can. So if you're having problems with money, I'm not saying come to me, but we can chat. We can chat about how you find money for projects like that. And the last one is about the language and the culture and things. There's a language which is used, common language. Then there's medical language. I tried very hard because we're community-based and we're speaking Xhosa. I usually write things up for students that when you see the patient, these are the words that you understand. And then they would go, just a child from here in Natal who speaks in Indian, would say, Molo Mama, and look and say, wait. And then they go on, and you could tell that it was not internalized, they were just saying it. So I got rid of that thing, and I said, talk to her. We'll use an interpreter as well. That medical language is actually totally different from what people say. Even today, they come to my surgery and say, Gqirha, kukhona into engena apha. Ihle ngomqolo. Kuthi ubugqatha obu ihle into ngiqamba ukuthi mandithi Now, that's not in the books. That's cultural language. And you've just got to be there to know, to understand. To the extent that as they start right now, for example, sciatica, it never starts here. Pain from sciatica, that is from the spinal cord, starts here and goes down. That's what the book says. You know what the patients do? It starts there and it comes up to here. Because their concept about illness and things, something terrible happened to your foot and it's going up. And you have to deal with those things. So
it's those nuances I was talking about.
Yes.
There's nuances.
Nuances. Yeah. And so I catch myself speaking their language now, because that's what they understand. I also understand. It's easier for me to understand what they say than for them to understand what I'm saying. So I switch, it's conversion. And we get on very well.
Yes.
Thanks, colleagues. This is really so amazing. I wanted to ask a few questions for both of you. Ask you, what are some of the failures you have experienced in your lives? Be it at a medical student, registrar, consultant, or leadership senior level. And what have those taught you?
This time you start.
Yes. I think I would say that I got to a stage where maybe because I was fortunate and I was always, even in primary school, secondary school, high school, I was always in the sort of top class in terms of position. I began to think that anything is possible, everything is possible. It probably was a good thing that it was driving me. But then when you fail, you can't take it. And you become depressed in terms, not so mentally depressed, but discouraged, that's the word I must use. So I would say that the sort of failures in my part were particularly at the medical school when I was a dean. Because there were times, we lived through the time of the mergers, and we used to spend hours late at night and discussing. And the biggest sort of problem was convincing people of your ideas. And when they don't accept them, again, because you're used to people, following you, they don't follow you, and you get upset with them, and you you call them names they don't understand, and that kind of thing. And I didn't realize it was my failure to convince them. They are the ones who are wrong. So once we get to that situation where it's the other person who's wrong, and you are always right, it's a bad thing, I think, as an individual. And also, it might impact even on your work. When you start doing this kind of thing as you're working with people, becoming overbearing, and you don't feel it. And sometimes people tend to withdraw and not support you because you become... I remember the expression when I was dean, there'll be somebody who is maybe mediocre, but because there were other qualities that I felt I could see, he was local, and I would support his promotion because we want transformation. And the people would say, "Ay, umazwai unabantu bakhe." His favoritism. And it was difficult to get out of that. And again, I put my cross because I would say, "Ay, no tiko unabantu bakhe." And you are the chosen one. I am the dean, or I'm in this position. I have to take a decision. I have chosen you to do this. That is a point of view. But sometimes you get fixed in those positions, and then people start labeling you, and so it's a very difficult thing. I think it was dealing with, with people. From the work point of view, I think I was fortunate to have that wisdom of knowing the difference between things you can change and things you can't change. And I always deferred or referred so that you don't get mad or whatever it is they put on your face when they don't like you.
Yes, my biggest failure at home is that I wasn't always there when my children needed me. But I was lucky my life partner was there for them. But certainly if I were to live my life again, I would try to be more available to them than I was. At work, my biggest failure is my temper, my strictness, my harshness. I believe when somebody makes a mistake, when I correct them, I don't have the patience to say, let's wait until it ends, and then I'll call somebody to the side and say, I just do it there and then, right there in public. It's my biggest weakness, and it makes people very tense. But certainly, knowing that I am strict, all of them would go right through up to the end, because they say, if you stick there up to the end, you finish, you pass it. But if I were to relive my life again, I would say I should have more patience and not be harsh and impatient with people making mistakes. I look back and I identify that as my weakness. Some people think it's a question of philosophy, maybe upbringing. Some people think you have to be nice to change it. That's not my making. So they wouldn't call me the nicest fellow, but I tell them the results are there for me for me to show that my way also works. I tend to be a disciplinarian, which is not the modern world's concept of a good person. Yes. Now, hey, see, this is the problem. we grew up differently.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. May I start off by expressing my gratitude to be here and for the arrangement of this event. Thank you so much. So I'm Mohammed Suleiman. I'm a fourth year medical student at UKZN. And I wanted to ask the question about mentorship. How important is it that we as the students should have an academic mentor, And further, how do we maintain that relationship with our mentor? Because my observation, being a student, is that our student community, our student population, they just lack that interest to go further than the classroom setting, because it's all about our test in 2 weeks or the test in 1 month, but we do not want to go beyond that in the community. So I don't see that, it's that activism in the students. How do we spark that interest? And I think that an avenue for that is to hold on to a mentor. So how important is it for us, the students, to have a mentor? And further, how do we maintain that ongoing relationship and communication? Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would say if that is not happening, it's very unfortunate. Mentoring is such an important thing that sometimes it happens sort of sua sponte, you pick up somebody as your mentor. But at WSU, we actually made mentoring a part of of learning. For example, if you're doing problem-based learning, as we used to do, there would be mentors as well in that. So that we grew mentorship from the first year and going up. I think when you get to the senior postgraduate, people tend to maybe a bit more choice about who's going to be a mentor or role modeling. I'm not sure if at that high level you can enforce people. But the people called tutors, isn't it, Prof? And I think tutors become your mentors, but the students themselves were taught to mentor each other. And when you learn in groups, as we did with problem-based learning, it comes out easily. And if it's not there, it's unfortunate. I know some of the students tend to lean too much and not do work sufficiently, but that is part of the thing about mentoring.
If I may just approach it from a different angle. I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, but if you have children, they tend to identify with somebody who is like them. Like, for instance, to keep a university where, let me be blunt, that you have African students, for instance, and then they are taught by whites. It's like they start thinking this doesn't look like it's our thing. However, if somebody from the Transkei sees Uncle Mazwai coming there to do what he does, there's an attachment to say, this I can do. So all I'm saying is, we must also get away from the niceties of life, come back to the classroom, not be in private practice, come back to the classroom, let that child see, Guti, Ubaba Ngubane is from where I am from. He's my professor today. It looks like I can also be. I was telling our host, because from here, when we qualified, we went to Medunsa. Medunsa started in 1977. And Medunsa was supposed to be another new African medical school. And of course, there were politics to say, do we go there to Medunsa or not? Because, you know, it's another apartheid institution. We decided from here, University of Natal, that if that is started and they don't see the likes of us teaching them, we shall have failed them. So we completed and we went there, we trained there, we lectured there, and it's a success. And in short, if it wasn't for Medunsa, what you see in the medical scene of today wouldn't have been even half. That's mentorship is very strong if people identify, but it means you got to sacrifice. You got to say, I'll live the nice life, and I'll have to go there and do this for for these. And of course, I agree with the thing like when we were at University of the North, where when you have Maths 3, for instance, and of course it was just Afrikaner staff who have no time for you. I remember when we were in Maths 3, I don't know who appointed me and someone else to say, please go and mentor the first years. Now, when you go there and you have time to them and you teach them the way, the patient approach, because you know you understood it because somebody was patient with you. It did so much that many years later, you know, I would be stopped by somebody in Joburg City to say, oh, Professor so-and-so, I was in that class where you mentored us from third year. Mentorship is important, and it convinces people they can do it. So-and-so has done it, I'll also be able to do it. They have to identify, but that person has to have the time and the patience to do things patiently.
Professor Mkhokong and Professor Mazwai, thank you so much. It has been an honor. Oh, is there a question? Okay. All right.
Thank you very much. My name is Okuhle Mdebeni, and I'm a final year medical student. So once again, we are very happy and grateful to be here. Thanks to both of you also. So I think, just to reiterate, I'm not sure if the question was answered clearly on what advice do you have for us as students, especially upcoming, you know, to, in particular with your fields, because I'm sure unlike your uncle, you wouldn't discourage us from specializing in neurosurgery. But also, I think what Usis Nomakwezi had asked, you know, there are difficulties that we face as students. Sometimes it's overwhelming, and there's all of these challenges, mental health issues, you know, suicide. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. So what advice do you have for us, you know, that can be quite encouraging as we move? You know, we'd want to specialize, we still want to grow further in the field, and there's all of these discouragements, you know, and everything that's, that can be overwhelming to us as students. So.
Yeah, no, she's asking a difficult question, but I can understand where the question comes from. I think I would say to you, especially at this juncture, there was a time when you finish being a doctor, we would go into private practice, make a lot of money, and be rich. And so it was very difficult for people to stay and study and remain poor. So, but I can tell you, the field is saturated now. So you better, as you finish, not think of going out to make money. You better stay and become a specialist. And then when you are a specialist, you will still have an opportunity and a chance to make it even bigger with less effort. That's, I think that I must tell all of you. You've got to choose a line. And by the way, it is still important to say, because of the hardships of the education system we come from, when we are where we are, believe you me, you can be anything you want to be. That is why I said to you, there's nobody who failed, who came to me and failed, because failure is really mental ability, and the others are just behavioral. Behavioral you can change, mental ability you can change, but the mental ability of the people who are talking about is quite sound. And so they can be anything they want to. It depends on what they would like to be, whether you want to be a surgeon or a physician or an anesthetist. You just choose and of course devote your time to it. Forget the money. You'll struggle nowadays to do it, to make it, because there are lots of GPs. Rather, go up and become a specialist. And from there, of course, you'll either stay or go out to make it bigger.
Yeah, my comment about the question, it probably didn't get answered properly because it's very difficult. Because I can easily say I come from a different generation from what you are, because I would ask the question, what's your problem? You know, I'd ask it so glibly, because you wanted to become a doctor. You should know what it takes to become a doctor, to become a medical student. Some of those things are not unexpected. Some of them come in as a bit of a surprise. I agree about the stress. We see it both in the class and in the social environment. All I can use is just big words like be strong. Being strong means that don't be discouraged. If you do have a problem which you think you need to share, that issue of mentorship becomes important, because the person who's given to you as a mentor, you've chosen as a mentor, becomes like a friend, and you can share some of the problems confidentially if there's psychosocial issues that you deal with. But then your teachers also should be role models to you. So there's a sort of a ladder on which you're going to climb. I just decided to have a very defiant attitude. That's me. For example, when I was told that after working so hard, I was lucky, my response was, fools are seldom lucky, and fortune favors the brave. And that's just what I said. And I just had to, when I say defiant, I mean, like, I'm in a fight here. And I've just got to see it through. I don't believe that you have that generation now of the same fighting spirit, because things, again, I'm talking from a different generation, might be a little bit easier for you at school. I don't know what they provide. The dean is here, the VC is here, so I must be careful about what I say. But there was provision for those students or people who might need sort of special attention. I don't know what other things would frustrate medical students. It's such a great job to do. Everything else doesn't matter. You just look at the top of the hill.
Gary Player, by the way, talking about people saying you are lucky. Somebody, after he won during his hay time, and he won by the last stroke, and somebody said to me, "Oh, Gary Player, obviously he didn't like him. You damn lucky, man. You're very lucky. Do you realize that?" He said, "You know what? The harder I train, the luckier I get."
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much, professors. Just the last question. You may have already alluded to it, but in a nutshell, looking at the state of the country today, the state of health today, and having lived through apartheid and having dealt with apartheid, you find that a lot of people are becoming very disillusioned. But I think there are lessons that you can share with us, having lived through apartheid, and the people that live today tend to think things are more difficult than what they were then, and there's that loss of hope. What message can you give to the disillusioned? Thank you.
Well, I would really start with our government. There are many wrong things that we did. In order to correct them, we got to identify them. Take education, for instance. No nation can survive or thrive without education. I say it with tears in my eyes that, and I'm not glorifying Bantu education, But if you look at the majority of people, I'm not talking about private schools or Model C schools. I'm talking about schools in the townships, schools in the rural areas. Today, their education is much worse than the one we had. We are products of that Bantu education. But the reason was that Bantu education was not that Bantu education was a glorious thing. It wasn't. But our parents were teaching us. The people who taught us were not whites or Boers, they were our parents. You know, they are the same people who were with Mandela Kofote. When they were in politics, they were in arts, they were in this, so that they came and taught us. What did we do when we got liberated? We kicked them in the teeth. And they stumbled. And youngsters toyed and said, these are Bantu education teachers. Youngsters who themselves needed education started running education. We started chasing our inspectors away from schools. That's the biggest mistake we did. We finished. Education is worse now, unfortunately. And if we want to make amends, we start there. We change our attitude. We start valuing teachers and let them get the honor they deserve, because I'm what I am because of my teacher. I passed at university well because of a teacher at Orlando West High School under Bantu education, and Mr. Somo, who taught me maths such that when I went to university, it was first level maths. So we kicked our teachers in the teeth. We need to apologize. We need to start afresh. We need to respect them. The same thing can be said in health. We did certain things in the health sector. Like, for instance, we used to have so many nurses produced by hospitals. And what happened? That training of nurses in hospitals, where from first year, second year, they would be cleaning the patients, go to the lectures, and so on. We try to teach them now in the center of a busy street in town. That nurse, when she comes out qualified, doesn't even know how to handle a patient. Let us correct the mistakes we did first. It's a good start. Because if you don't do that, it means you don't realize you made mistakes. And there's no way you'll change. You start by correcting a mistake you recognize.
Yeah. It's very, very difficult to answer that question for me without being emotional, because I am one of the disillusioned people. When I said that I was offered jobs in the UK, I was also offered jobs in Canada. I worked with the Canadian surgeon here at McCord's Hospital in 1970. He was recruiting me to go and work in Canada. And I said to myself, no, I can't do that. I can't leave my people and go and work there, because they don't need me, they need me here. And then I came back. I put my head in, and then after 20 years, I find that, man, it's like I'm still fighting the same battles, only with different weapons, and I'm not succeeding. And I often say to my wife, if I knew I was coming back to this, maybe I should have stayed. That's not an answer. It's just telling how badly I feel about how things have gone wrong when they should not have gone wrong. I've been through the whole medical, network within the South Africa. I've been chairman of MRC, president of the colleges of medicine, served in the Health Professional Council at high level. One was appointed by the minister, the other one was an appointment, Minister of Health, the other one appointment of Minister of Education. And we tried to do what we call transformation, but we didn't transform properly. In the transformation, I think we've broken some of the fundamentals and the foundations, for example, of education. So in rebuilding, I think we broke too many things because they were being too radical. like you said, you come, these are Bantu education teachers. They taught us. We became what we are through them, and we owe it to them. Now, for somebody now to come and say, get away, kick that, and we'll change that. I mean, for example, if you take students, they're frustrated now, some of them, not because of the toughness of the work that they're doing. It's because they don't see the future. They don't see the future. The figures are quoted. You finish university, you don't have a job. So there's no motivation. It's bad. This year, at the beginning of the year, because I operated St. Elizabeth Hospital on Wednesdays. At the beginning of the year, there were 3 medical officers who finished their ComServe. One of them wanted to do surgery. And there's no post in Namtata for a registrar. And this girl is so frustrated. She's already a doctor. Then they didn't have money to pay for the interns, and they were not interns, post-com, they say, they call after community service. There was no money, no budget, and these doctors now, they had to go and toy. I'm sure it was in the papers in Bishop to get the money. So there are certain things that are so disheartening sometimes that it's very difficult to give an answer. But I think we have, unfortunately, destroyed some of the fundamentals.
By the way, we are not glorifying Bantu education. I hope you understand what we are saying. All we are saying, with these 30 years that we had, with those teachers who worked under that bad department, but they were working on their children. There's one thing I always say when I want to emphasize this point. Those teachers tried their best. All we needed to do was to embrace them. And if they achieved what they achieved under those circumstances, can you imagine where we would be 30 years of liberation with the same teachers? There's something called Joint Matriculation Board. I think people who are old enough, we grew during the time of Joint Matriculation Board. I was a student at Orlando West High School. There were 3 high schools in Soweto that had Joint Matriculation Board. It was Orlando West High School. I was lucky to be there. It was Orlando High School. Chicano was lucky to be there. It was Maurice Isaacson High School. Now, it wasn't the Boers who said, let's take Joint Matriculation Board to the blacks, because that was even higher than their national exams. It was our own teachers who were rubbing shoulders with Mandela Bobo Forte. But now let's start having this speciality. We should have embraced them. They would have taken us very far in the 30 years that we've gone through.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
It's been an honor. Thank you very much, Professor Mkhokong and Professor Mazwai, for being here. And at this point, I'll hand over to the Dean.
Thank you so much, Nonwebo. We are so privileged to have you guys, and we are so happy you could make it. I think on a positive note, they say it gets worse before it gets better. So we are hoping that, with our future young, bright doctors here and leaders, things will be better, and we shall be hopeful. But we are so inspired by your journeys, and we are so grateful. We love you. We appreciate what you have done, and we shall continue to appreciate the work that you do. And with that, we would like to present you we'll start with Prof. Mazwai. This is something that you can be proud of and hang in your study as a token of appreciation for your contribution from the UKZN Medical School, as well as UKZN as a whole. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
the work that you have
Appreciate
done.
it. Yeah, that was me. By the way, just as a interruption, one of the reasons I don't mind people telling my age is that in my culture, when you are this age, you have certain liberties. You can say things that other people cannot say, like ushabulela. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much to you, Prof. Nkgokong, as well. I've read so much about you. I've learned so much from you, and I never thought I'd see you because I think you left before we got into medical school here. But we appreciate you again. We will continue to embrace you and value you, and keep in touch with us. If you want to come teach students here online, you're most welcome, both of you. And thank you so much again. This is from our institution, and thank you for all the work that you have done and your contribution to health and medicine. Thank you.
Greatest of our pleasure.
Thank
you. We are teaching your students. 50% of the students at Walter Sisulu are from KZN.
Wow. Colleagues, I think it remains of me to thank all of you for gracing this occasion with your presence. It's in the evening, it's late. Thanks to our facilitator, Nongcebo, that was amazing. Thanks to our guests, thanks to Prof. Nama, thanks to our PR department, as well as the admin, Bato, and everybody else, and the students, of course, that are here, and our Westville colleagues for hosting us this evening. And our photographer, of course. So have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for everything that you do for us. Our next event will be in November, and we have a lineup of our guests coming up. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also online.
Yeah. Right. What happened to the cap?
I've got it here.
Oh.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I'll take it along.
They want to.
Thank you for your nice and pointed questions.
Thank you.
They were very pointed.
Thank you.